At various points in your life, you might have been told to trust your gut. But research from psychology suggests that in some situations, being told to just trust your gut can be really bad advice. So in this video, I'm going to give you some information that should help you decide whether you should trust your gut or slow down and engage in more deliberate and careful thinking. When most people say gut feeling, they usually mean, I can't fully explain it, but it feels right, or it feels off. A helpful way to frame this from a psychological perspective is the dual process idea. According to this theory, some mental processes are fast and automatic, referred to as type 1 processes, whereas others are slower and more deliberate, referred to as type 2 processes. Dual process accounts emphasize that type 1 responses can dominate unless people make a concerted effort to engage type 2 thinking. Here's a simple example from the cognitive reflection test. Imagine a patch of lily pads on a lake. Every day the patch doubles in size. It takes 48 days to cover the entire lake. So, how long does it take for the patch of lily pads to cover half of the lake? Type 1 thinking often jumps to an answer of 24 days. And this is where many people go wrong. We rush to a type 1 answer in situations where type 1 thinking isn't well suited. If you stop and think about it for a moment, if the lily patch doubles in size every day, then half of the lake will be covered on day 47. You see, type 2 thinking isn't about being slower for no particular reason. It's what you use to check a tempting first answer, especially under conditions where that first answer might be misleading. At this point, it's important to note that type 1 processes are not simply an inferior version of thinking. Life often throws decisions at us faster than careful reasoning can keep up with. And it's not always necessary to invest significant time and effort picking apart a decision. So type 1 processes are your brain's default, fast, automatic, and under the right conditions, genuinely useful. Kahneman and Klein emphasize the importance of what they call boundary conditions. That just means the specific situations where fast type 1 thinking is more likely to be reliable. First, the environment has to have valid cues, a cue being a signal that you can notice, and a valid cue being a signal that predicts an outcome often enough to learn it. The second condition is that you get repeated practice with clear feedback. For example, experienced doctors and nurses can often spot a worrying pattern of symptoms, anticipate what's likely to happen next, and take the appropriate intervening action very quickly. And that speed doesn't come from guesswork. It's because over their years of practice, they've seen the same patterns play out again and again, and have had consistent feedback from things like patient outcomes. So, your intuition is strongest in situations where you have valid cues, repeated practice, and clear feedback. So what happens when cues are unclear, or feedback is missing, delayed, or ambiguous? Well, type 1 processing is still operating, but when the cues aren't reliable, it has to lean more heavily on heuristics. Think of these as mental shortcuts or rules of thumb that make a complicated decision or problem easier and faster to act on. They can be very useful, but they can also mislead. The availability heuristic is a good example to begin with. This refers to the fact that if something is vivid and easy to recall, it can feel more common or probable than it really is. For example, extensive media coverage of a plane crash can inflate your perception of how risky flying is, even though the base rate of aircraft crashes is tiny, meaning that flying is objectively very safe. Another common heuristic is representativeness, in which if something fits the story, we judge it as more likely, whilst neglecting the relevant base rate data. For example, if you think someone is quiet and enjoys reading books, guessing that they're a librarian might feel about right, but librarians are relatively rare. The base rate is low, so a statistically safer bet would be to guess a more common occupation, even if it feels less satisfying. We've just seen how type 1 thinking, what people usually mean when they refer to their gut feeling or intuition, can be misleading when the boundary conditions are not in place. Here's a quick gut audit to help you decide whether you should trust your gut. Question 1. Am I in a domain where I can rely on my intuition being well calibrated by experience, valid cues, and clear feedback over time? Question 2. What are the relevant base rates here? Roughly how common are the outcomes that are of concern to me in situations like this? Question 3. What would suggest my intuition is unreliable here? What evidence would change my mind? If you answer no or I'm not sure to any of these questions, it's probably safer not to default to your intuition. Slow down, think things through more deliberately, and if it's possible, test the decision in a smaller, safer way first. If you can think of any more pieces of common advice you'd like me to examine from a psychological perspective, put them in the comments section of this video. Be good to yourselves and each other, and I'll see you in the next video.